Hi guys, Jonathan Graham here for Guitar Interactive Magazine. We are sitting here, of course, with the one and only Chris Buck here on the Keeping the Blues Alive Mediterranean cruise. That's a bit of a mouthful.
The last day.
Absolutely. Now, mate, it's an absolute pleasure to see you all the time, but and particularly in these superb locations that we've been visiting, and then hearing you with Cardinal Black.
Oh, thank you, man.
On stage. How's this trip been for you?
Oh, it's been amazing. This is literally my first cruise ever, not just a musical cruise, but first cruise. So I had absolutely zero idea or expectation of, no idea what it was going to be, and it's been an absolute blast. It's just been, I'm terrible. I never go out to watch bands. Kind of like my favourite band could be playing at the end of my street, and I'd be too bloody lazy to go out wear my own shadow to go and see them. But just having instant access to incredible music all the time is, you kind of start to take it for granted, I guess, at the end of the 5 days or whatever we've been on the boat. But it's been amazing just to see world-class musicians at every turn. Is incredible. Yeah, it's been great fun.
And the thing is, like, just so the guys are aware, the boat is currently rocking.
Literally,
as we're there's coat hangers in the background going. So if a camera falls over, please bear with us. But with that in mind, what have been some of the things in performing on a big cruise ship like this that have been, surprising challenges for you?
It's funny, you forget it's so steady most of the time, now being the exception, we're all over the place. You kind of forget you're on a boat. But it's just once or twice it'll catch you off guard. I think it was the first show actually where, again, we hadn't long left port particularly, so everything was kind of very smooth and very calm, and then every now and then you've got to put your foot down and the world would seem to move underneath your feet. Be like, have I had a drink? What's happening? And you're like, no, stone cold sober. Like, yeah, we're on a boat, that'd be it. So just little moments like that. It's been, for the most part, again, went to watch Joe doing his Live from Nerdville talk in the theatre the other day, and again, just kind of like one or two moments you'd kind of feel it go, and it's just surreal. You're sat in a theatre for all intents and purposes, at no point does it occur to you, I'm on a boat in the middle of the bloody Mediterranean Sea here. So apart from that, it's been, the power has been a little bit noisy. You just kind of notice, you keep expecting to hear the Coast Guard coming through your amp. So it's been just kind of little, idiosyncratic challenges like that, but that's the same in nearly any venue you play. You get little kind of quirks. So it's been great. It's been, far too hot for my liking. I'm going to stick to Cardiff from now on.
My head's already.
Yeah, oh man. Yeah, that walk into Santorini today nearly killed me. So 30 plus degree heat is not. You can tell I'm dressed for the Mediterranean Sea, like Homer Simpson. One wardrobe all year round. But no, it's been amazing. It's been an absolute blast, and playing's been fun. We're just incredibly flattered we've been asked to be here. Which is cool. So hope we've made a good impression.
Definitely, and we're going to get some clips up on the once we get some internet back. We'll get some clips up. With you, obviously with Revstar, in hand. Can you talk us through what you've been using on these shows?
So in terms of backline, it's been rented backline. So just spec'd a 65 reissue Super Reverb. So that's been I think it's the same one that's followed me around the different stages on the ship. I'm not entirely sure though, but every time I've seen it, someone's turned it up to 10. And I made that mistake the second time I turned it on and killed everyone in the immediate vicinity. So 65 Super Reverb, or 65 reissue Super Reverb as a backline, as an amp. Brought my pedal board. Surprised the playing got off the ground, in all honesty, with that in the cargo hold. And then guitars wise, we've got the Revstar and we've got a Squier Jazzmaster. The Squier, principally because it's an amazing guitar, kind of people see that and think, oh, you're bringing that because you're worried about flying with it. And well, I've been touring with it in the back of the van for the last 6 months. It's just a very, very cool guitar. And obviously kind of love affair with the Revstar ongoing. So relatively straightforward. I didn't want to overdo it and bring too much. Sam, our bass player, brought his bass as well. I brought a Yamaha something or other bass.
Okay.
So we kept it relatively lightweight, just because flying gear around the world is expensive and a little bit sort of not dangerous, but just there's always an edge. Just the kind of like, is it going to come out at all, or is it going to come out in 3 bits?
Of course.
Let's see how it goes. So
just that's not stress that you want to be adding to.
No. It's kind of part of the course. I've got the air tags in the case, so at least if it does end up in Amsterdam Schiphol, which is the sort of the keeper of all lost things, my gear always seems to end up in Amsterdam, irrespective of whether I'm going anywhere near Amsterdam. So no end of times about to kind of retrieve it from Bristol Airport or something when it's flown in on its own the next day.
Absolutely.
So
and on the board, that's just sort of grown over the years. I mean, it's quite something to, it's obviously amazing to see you play, but to see you do that little dance of get this pedal and that one on, because you've got the gig rig, you've got the Helix, and you've got your multiple pedals.
There's a bit going on. It's the talent replacement centre, which basically saves me practicing. If you keep buying more pedals, you don't have to rehearse, do you? So
that's what they say.
So the plan goes. In reality, as you said, it's a bit of a kind of dance. There's a lot of stuff going on. Cardinal Black in particular is not heavy on effects so much, but just kind of like there's a lot of, I wouldn't describe it as ambient stuff, but there's a lot of kind of like textural stuff that I'm playing in, whether it's the verse of tracks or whether it's even in between tracks or as intros. And just having that little kind of extra palette or colours to paint with, I think, adds to the texture or the kind of richness of the music, So, I get a fair bit of grief in that respect, Couldn't get away with a Tube Screamer. I'm just like, well, I could, but I wouldn't want to. It's my gig.
The thing is, actually, to be fair, I mean, you're such a dynamic player. I mean, even just playing with, we're just going, and you're humouring me here, let me, play some guitar with you. But it is such a pleasure to hear how you can just come into a room with whatever amp you've got, but you seem to be able to bring out these extra dynamics.
Oh, thank you.
Naturally, which almost creates this ambient
thing.
I mean, this is clearly something you've worked at a lot. I mean, what do you think is the key to, just being able to turn on an amp, get a half decent sound that you're happy with, but then being able to create all these different colours with just your fingers?
I mean, I've kind of played a variety of rigs, and it's part of the course of touring is that the backline isn't always necessarily exactly what you would want. So I think it's pointless being too precious over, well, this isn't the amp that I spec'd or this isn't the amp that I wanted. You've got to learn to adapt and learn to just deal with different equipment, and get the best out of it and know how to get the best out of it. People get very bogged down in neck profiles or pickups or specifics, and it seems like a little bit of a contradiction when I am fairly specific about my gear, at least in terms of pedals. It seems like a little bit of a juxtaposition there, I guess, or a paradox. But at the end of the day, it's all got, as long as it's got 6 strings on it, learn to get the best out of it. That's part and parcel of being a, kind of semi-competent musician, which I'd probably put myself in that bracket. So just learning to get the best out of things and being comfortable with not always necessarily having exactly what you want. And then just taking it from there. I mean, it is one of the kind of the better things, I guess, of having multiple pedals or having a couple of different pedals which cover the same kind of ground or the sort of same territory, is that you have got that flexibility. If an amp isn't kind of doing what you want it to do, there's ways around working with that and being able to, if not just necessarily get the best out of it, get the best that it's capable of. Drop the mic to get you through the show. And just being flexible and being able to adapt. I don't know, to compare it to like a racing driver or something. A good driver would be able to get in an F1 car or a bloody Nissan Micra and be able to get the best out of it.
Did you always feel like that, or is that something that you've learned?
Yeah, well, I guess I've always felt like that. Whether or not I've always pulled that off is another matter. But I guess it's just like a pragmatism. I've always been fairly open-minded to gear and just using whatever they're tools at the end of the day. People get very sort of sentimental about guitars and whatnot, and as much as I love certain guitars and would be devastated if, when I'm flying home, if that rev starts, the bloody headstock snapped off it, I'd be gutted. But it's just a guitar.
Yeah.
And, kind of, okay, I might not be able to get another rev start tomorrow that does exactly the thing that does. But, I wouldn't lose sleep over it. I'd just kind of on with the show, pick up another one and away you go. So, try to be pragmatic about things and just, they're tools at the end of the day, and use the right tool for the job. You just use the tool that's going to best facilitate what it is that you're trying to say or what you're trying to do.
A lot of it does seem to be down to the just how mentally you think about playing,
totally,
and how you handle these live situations and being ready on, because this is the thing, like it's such an incredible player, but you're very, very consistent in what you
thank
do.
you.
I mean, maybe to you sometimes at times you sort of feel like,
doesn't necessarily feel like that in my head.
I had a night off, I had whatever,
bad night.
But bad night, but it never sounds that way. And of course, like for guys watching and for myself as well, even having to have played there with yourself, I'm like, oh shit, like, can I get my fingers that little bit warmer? Oh my, there's always something in my head that can get in the way, and I'm sure a lot of people can relate to that. There must have been a time where you were a little like that as well, where you were going like,
now,
oh shit, why can I not do the thing that I did at home?
It still happens all the time. Like, we did, and it was a perfect storm of just shit circumstances. We did 2 festivals back to back a couple of weeks ago. One on the Friday night in just outside Zurich in Switzerland, and then we had to fly back. We were doing Black Deer Festival in Kent the day after, fairly early, so we were on from like 10 o'clock till midnight, say, in Switzerland, up at 4 o'clock in the morning, then to get back to Zurich airport, to fly into Gatwick, I think it was, to drive straight to Black Deer to get on at like 1 o'clock in the afternoon on the main stage. So it was like a really quick turnaround, all during which period I had food poisoning. So I was rough as guts for the entire trip. And, chuck on top of that, my pedal board got damaged in transit going out, or coming back to Black Deer, it actually got damaged. So you don't necessarily find that out until like the third song in the middle of this festival in front of like, I don't know, 10,000 people or whatever, and suddenly things start malfunctioning. And it's impossible at that point not to get in your head about it and kind of start thinking, well, I'm not enjoying this. Nobody out there could be enjoying it. They couldn't possibly be enjoying it because I'm having a terrible day.
But do you actually feel the tension in your hands?
Yeah, I mean, I guess the way around that is I've always been fairly good, I think, at least in my head, as to kind of always equate it to playing football. When I used to play football, if I was having a bad game, you would try and push through it. You would just work harder. You would run harder. You would, kind of chase things down that little bit quicker and try and push yourself through it. It's pointless just kind of wallowing in your own misery at that point and thinking, oh, I'm having a crap day, I'm just going to sit here and sulk.
It is what it is.
It is what it is. Yeah. Work through it, and just kind of whether that, equates to digging in on the guitar a little bit harder, or kind of maybe just focusing on the basics and making sure that you're nailing the stuff that you absolutely need to be nailing. I mean, Cardinal Black is obviously quite a guitar-centric band. There are a fair amount of guitar solos, and for the most part, they're improvised. There's a couple of moments where kind of people want to hear the guitar solo that's on the record, I guess, but the rest of the stuff is just a little bit, gives me free rein, which is cool, which is liberated in one sense, and can be a little bit daunting if you're not necessarily having a great night. Because if you're not having a great night, so the last thing you want to be doing is trying to be going off piste, because that's when that's when the shit hits the fan, even on a good night sometimes. If you're having a bad night, it's just that little bit extra, pushing something up a hill.
You got to get those foundations solid, and then you can push it a little bit more if you're feeling it.
The one thing I think which is almost insurmountable, or can feel insurmountable on stage, is when you're not happy with the sound. So when we did the festival in again, just kind of perfect storm of like crap circumstances, when I had food poisoning in Switzerland, it was rough. I hadn't eaten in 24 hours at that point. It was kind of barely just sipping at water, because everything, not bog you down in details, but everything was making a reappearance if I was trying to even have water. So I was just dehydrated. I was kind of feeling rough, and the amp I had was a rented Super Reverb that just sounded bloody awful. The best one in the world. It had just obviously been ragged, not necessarily looked after probably as well as it should have been, and it just sounded crap. And that is a hard one to get your head when you're feeling rough, especially, and then you've plugged into something which sounds like you're plugged into the bloody oven. Just kind of like, well, God, could this day get any worse? And that's a difficult one. Then you're trying to find a sweet spot on stage where maybe those frequencies that you're hearing that you don't necessarily want to be hearing feel less pokey, or kind of not really kind of battering about your head, when you stood 2 or 3 yards that way. So that can be a difficult one. And again, it's just a case of not getting too in your head about it. I mean, this, like I said, it can feel insurmountable, because if you're not happy with the sound on stage, you're not happy with the sound on stage, and it's hard to play to your fullest then. But it's at that moment you've got to remind yourself that, kind of, they don't care. They don't necessarily know that you're having a bad night. The punters, the people out front, are actually paying to watch you play. You've got to put on a good show for them. You've got to at least be seen to be enjoying it, and just kind of make the best of a bad situation. So we're off again, aren't we?
Let's
go in.
Definitely. And on that note as well, of being off again, because that's clearly the band all saying, yeah, we've talked about Chris now. Can you talk about,
exactly.
The rest of us? There's other guys.
That was Tom jumping in the pool.
That was absolutely. No offense, Tom. But Cardinal Black, the record dropped. Superb response for it. You guys have been taken out on the road, and the fan response is great. In fact, in a lot of ways, this is the first time in front of an American, even though we're not in America.
Exactly. It is. It's
you're going to be taking the band over to the States. I think
next summer. It's there's one thing confirmed, and we're looking to kind of spread a couple of things around that. Then it's not been announced yet, so I won't say it yet.
Okay.
But, yeah, we're doing some stuff in the US next summer. So the major hurdle with that has just been the logistical and kind of financial sort of barriers put up in specifically in regard to touring the US. It's just astronomically expensive to get visas for so many people.
You need to get those Blackberry Smoke patches to sell.
Yeah.
Because they're flying out the door, so you get them in the Metal store. The Cardinal Black version.
They're such lovely blokes as well. Charlie was, I don't know whether you saw him, Charlie was stood stage watching us yesterday, and I had a succession of very sweet messages off him after the show. So, yeah, they're lovely guys.
What a talent he is.
Oh, he's incredible. Like the entire band, I stood watching them from various places when they played on the pool deck the other day, but for a little while I stood behind the stage looking down on the band, and obviously it's a bizarre mix you get at that point, because I think they're all on in-ears as well, so you're not even getting wedge vocals pushed back at you, just getting a very loud instrumental mix of the band, and just like the musicianship across the board is just phenomenal, but also just how loud they play on stage is just refreshing, when everything's going kind of ampless and in-ears, etc., just to get the thump of like 3 4x12 cabs just blaring with an AC30 seemingly hidden behind all of them as well, kind of pushing it out. It's just like, yes, proper band, proper rock and roll.
What about new music from Cardinal Black?
So I guess it's a weird one, obviously the kind of new record, the record, our only record, came out in October of last year, so that's already coming up on a year. It doesn't particularly feel like that. We've toured it fairly extensively around the UK and a little bit of Europe. We're off to Europe again in a couple of weeks' time, off to the Netherlands and doing Luxembourg, and there's some stuff coming up before that as well, which should be announced soon around Germany with any luck. Obviously did the tour with Peter Frampton last year as well, his finale tour. And so we've been fairly busy, so we've kind of been writing whilst on the road to a degree. We're not that band that kind of writes at soundcheck particularly, because it's just not always practical, but we have been writing and kind of getting some stuff under the belt with a view to start recording that relatively soon. So we're not putting a date on anything next year particularly yet, but this about an album's worth of material, I guess, already. I think what we're conscious of is, just because we've got, I don't know, 10 tracks per se, it's not a case of like, right, well, let's just go and record them 10 tracks, because the writing process generally comes, I think we're pretty lucky in that respect, and it's quite an effortless process, especially when me and Tom kind of put our heads together, and that's going back to the kind of early days of the trio, which was the kind of original incarnation of Cardinal Black 10, 12 years ago, whatever it was. Writing has always been quite a fluid, quite a fast process with us, so it's never been, we've never found ourselves at a kind of a dry spot particularly, or dry spell, but yeah, we're keen to keep writing, maybe get another kind of 5-6 tracks under our belt, and then whittle it down to the best ones, as opposed to just recording everything we've got. So hopefully at some point, kind of, if not mid next year, early to mid next year, I guess, whether that's going to be a second record, or whether that's, again, it kind of opens up a wider debate, I guess, as to almost the relevance of records, long form records anymore. I love them, and I think this would probably be a bad situation to talk about that, because I'd imagine this demographic in particular on this cruise are all very much fans of that album format, but it can feel a little bit frustrating. I was listening to an interview with John Mayer actually a couple of weeks ago, talking about his last record, saying that you put so much effort into a record, and then you release it, you get that fanfare of the kind of, the kind of 2-3 weeks around its release, obviously all of the press, all of the kind of media stuff that you do in that period, and then the moment that finishes, it's kind of like flat. It's like, well, if John Mayer feels like that with all of the power of a major label behind him, and his kudos and his kind of gravitas of being that successful a musician, kind of does make you wonder, well, why do you put all that effort in and expense? It still costs the same to make a record as it did a long time ago, if you want to do it well. It just feels a bit frustrating to get the end of that process then and release something in the world that you're incredibly proud of, and it has like 2 or 3 weeks in the spotlight, and then everyone's like, right, what next?
It's really interesting because, when we just spoke with Joe Bonamassa, yesterday, he was saying the same thing.
Okay, cool.
Because he's actually saying that this, not Blues Deluxe Volume 2 that's coming out, but the next one that he's got pretty much in the can, that when that drops, that might be the last record. That he puts out,
interesting, okay.
Because he's thinking the same as you, he's thinking of the importance. My argument would be, by the way, John Mayer, it's John Mayer, for fuck's sake, you know what I mean? And I'm assuming he'd be talking about Sob Rock on that, on that record. Yeah. And it's a good record, But at the end of the day, if you put out a fucking good record, it makes an impact.
Totally,
that's the thing, So it's kind of like if you put out something and it's maybe just like, it's just okay, it's just the same stuff that people expect, or maybe it's even subpar, then maybe you're having that argument of like, oh, it was kind of didn't get the response that I wanted.
Yeah.
But if it's fucking great, then or maybe not. I don't know.
Totally.
Expert,
I guess I guess there's no shying away from if you make a record, whoever it is, if you make a record which doesn't particularly resonate with people, it would be quite easy at that point to hide behind the notion of, it's people don't get records anymore, And I guess if, like you said, if you make a great record, that will live on and it will have a life of its own, But it's just, I guess it's kind of. I think it resonated with me personally because you think, well, like I said, if someone of that,
of course,
with that amount of clout feels the same frustration, then kind of like obviously that trickles down to smaller bands who haven't got the marketing power, haven't got the kind of budget, frankly, of bigger major label artists. You're kind of thinking, well, you feel like you're pushing uphill a little bit, and I guess at that point there maybe is an argument to be made for. Maybe it culminates in a record, but maybe it's 12 months of new songs, drip fed and videos and live sessions to accompany that. Yeah. I guess the trick is, or the tricky part is that for this type of music, it's still quite entrenched in that album format. Understandably so. I'm such a big fan of the album. I love getting a new record and kind of enjoying that record as the creator intended it to be enjoyed, in its sequential running order, just at the very least, not listening to the bloody thing on shuffle, just enjoying the album start to finish in one sitting and kind of taking it in as a work of art, as opposed to like, I like track 3, I'll just listen to track 3. But,
I've given you a topic for Fred.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. No, it's a strange one. It's it's interesting to hear that infinitely bigger artists like Joe are having that kind of same thought process.
Well, he was talking about the money as well. The money he's got, but he was still going. Yeah, but it's still the studios are not any cheaper. He brings in 400 people.
Oh, totally. I mean, the band, one of the things that we're looking to do with the next record as well, which we didn't particularly have the luxury of with the first record, is doing it residentially, just going to live at the studio for however long it takes and actually record like that, because it's old school. Again, it's this contradiction of trying to reinvent the wheel and think of new innovative ways of releasing music, and at the same time we're going to try and recreate bloody Led Zeppelin where they all go and live in one room and record a record. It's a bit of a contradiction, but we didn't have that luxury with the first record. It was recorded fairly quickly, but a little bit more sporadically in terms of like, right, well, Rob's is in work until X time now, but as soon as he's finished, get him down to some drums, and then kind of, accommodate accordingly. But I think there is so much to be said for just getting in that headspace of, kind of like, we're making a record, and whenever the moment strikes of kind of like, oh, well, this, let's do that now, you can do it. And it's not a case of like, well, let's wait until 5, half 5. So I'm excited to do that, and I think that's something that the kind of the relative success, it's all relative, and the relative success that we've had so far has kind of afforded us to do, I guess.
So you're working with like so many great brands, some big massive ones, some new and up and coming brands. You must be getting an awful lot of offers for some stuff. Is there anything that's sort of in the pipeline at the moment that you could let us into, like?
Nope.
But there are things happening.
Yeah. I can't really say this. I guess it's the obvious kind of, again, I'm not going to give too much away, but I think it's just, again, kind of, I've talked about it in the past, people get, especially in the guitar world, I guess the up-and-comers get very bogged down in the notion of endorsements and sponsorships, whatever you want to kind of refer to it as, I guess. And I was guilty of it myself early on, especially when I started being approached by brands as to kind of like, oh, can we send you this? And like, after however many years of being guitar obsessed and saving up to buy things, suddenly this idea of like free shit. People
Yeah.
want to send this to me for free. You're like, yeah, great, send away. And suddenly you're inundated with all this stuff. And you think, well, nothing's free. They want their pound of flesh. Nothing is gratis in this world. They want you to then endorse that or kind of tell people how good it is or do a video or whatever it is. And, kind of, again, not to kind of specify a brand, but I remember the first time that bit me in the arse, I kind of got a pedal and didn't particularly like it, but I kind of, sort of informally agreed that it would kind of lead to a video. Did a video, did everything in my power to make it sound better than I kind of felt like it actually sounded, and then had a message off someone who obviously bought it, having watched me play it, and sort of in a roundabout way was basically kind of politely saying, what is this? It doesn't sound anything like it does, in your video. How do you set yours? And kind of, I remember that was a big watershed moment for me in terms of like, oh right, I have, even if it's just one person that's bought something because I've kind of, if not actively endorsed it, but I've kind of inadvertently implied that it's half decent, that now gives, there's a responsibility attached with that, and you have to be a little bit careful about what you're seen to be even holding, and like just bizarre situations like guitar shows, people kind of, and I guess I'm relatively polite. I try to be polite, I don't want to be a dickhead to people, but like suddenly you get like a guitar thrust in your hands, no idea what it is, and then someone's trying to take a photo of you with that guitar. I'm like, what is this? I got no idea what this is, and then the next thing you know, he tagged in it on social media,
Cheeky.
and it's kind of like, it's not particularly cricket. So yeah, in regard to endorsements, that's the kind of that's the thing I've always said, is that I only play brands first and foremost whose stuff I like.
We get at that level now,
Well, yeah, but anything that does come as a consequence then is that much more genuine. It's that much more. There's a history and there's a sense of continuity to it. It's not just a case of kind of like going with the best offer or going with the first brand that kind of offers you what you want. And
you got to still respect the guys coming up though, because that way you may have made a decision to side with a brand because it, from an exposure perspective as well. You might be like, it's not exactly the right thing for me, but it's a bigger brand. They want me on board, and I can get. And I think sometimes people are very easy to criticize on YouTube as well, but the YouTubers and stuff like that, because they think, oh,
corporate
you're a seller,
and
it's like, man, you got to pay your bills, and if a brand wants to get behind you,
totally,
and it's not like signing your life away.
No, absolutely. Again, I've got the utmost kind of respect and sympathy for anyone trying to make a living in music to any extent, really. Whether that's kind of at the top 1% or whether that's kind of, I guess the 98% of money to be made in music is earned by the top 1%, I guess, and then it's just, I guess the good thing about it being that much more diverse these days in terms of, subgenres of kind of everything has an audience, everything has a niche, and it's that much easier to get a piece of the pie. It's just you're getting a very small piece of a very big pie now, whereas I guess in years gone by that wasn't necessarily the case. But like you said, it's that's a massive part of it, is the kind of endorsement, the more corporate side of things, which isn't necessarily what people want to hear about. I guess they want to think everything is kind of entirely transparent, which I try to be transparent for the most part, which I think again comes back to only using gear by brands that I like their stuff, and it's been born out of a genuine love for the Revstar's a great example of that, and I guess Yamaha for someone who's come from like a Strat playing background, especially like myself, and lucky enough to do quite a lot of work with Fender over the years, people then look at my kind of usage of a Revstar or a Yamaha, which I guess if it's not kind of the immediate name which comes to people's lips, I guess, for electric guitar, it's Fender or it's Gibson or it's PRS, I guess, more recently. They look at that, and I guess there could be a skepticism attached to that as to kind of like, well, it's a money thing, it's this reason or it's that reason. And I've always been quick to point out that like I played a Revstar when they were released in 2015. I remember being like really attracted to it initially because I thought it was unusual to see a new guitar that had come out that wasn't kind of total derivation of like a Strat or a Tele or a Les Paul. It's got its influences, most of which are actually of Yamaha origins anyway. It's got a kind of hint of the SG series about it, SG 2000s from back in the day. But there's an old guitar Yamaha made in the 70s called the Superflighter, which is principally the Revstar, in terms of its kind of fundamental shape. So yeah, I just remember being immediately attracted to that, played it, loved the kind of combination of, kind of at the time, at least they had the P90s and wrap over tailpiece, and everything about it just kind of felt very intuitive and very natural. and that kind of spawned this relationship with Yamaha, which has just flourished, you know. And it's especially since the kind of launch of Cardinal Black, it's kind of become my main guitar with this band. You know, there are moments where I want something like a Jazzmaster for the trem or for just a different sound, but for the most part, it's pretty exclusively Revstar.
It's become really, you know, that iconic look for you, you know, with that gold guitar. Look, just admit it, Chris. You've got a signature triple neck Ibanez coming out.
Yeah, double baritone or something crazy.
Now there's people do share things that they see you play. Obviously, you know, like there's a lot of photos of your pedal boards and people debate. I've not seen that pedal before, and what's that like? So, you know, are you aware of this? Like in these forums that people are posting this and discussing, like basically everything that you show up with these days. People are debating what's that for, and is that is that some signature pedal? Is that
start sticking a Metal Zone on there or something just to confuse people.
You should do that.
But it's all a Pod Go, really. What was the original Pod, the Kidney Bean one?
Well, you could probably end up doing a Bad Monkey price search. You know, obviously a great pedal. As long
as I buy some of them first before I send their prices crazy.
Absolutely.
It's funny, like, you know, again, I would be far too arrogant or grandiose of me to accept any responsibility for like price hikes and certain things, but I remember kind of, again, it was a fairly kind of important moment for me reading quite a few forum posts in regards to, it was Highway 1 Strats, which were fairly sort of obscure thing that Fender did.
But great guitars.
Fantastic guitars, you know, kind of really fly under the radar to a degree. At least they did before, like myself to a degree, much bigger degree. Corey Wong started using them. It's the Corey Wong signature Strat is kind of loosely based on his Highway 1. And I remember reading some forum posts kind of criticising, you know, tongue-in-cheek to a degree, but criticising myself and Corey Wong for driving the price of Highway 1 Strats up. And again, it's funny, isn't it? You know, kind of, you know, we're very guilty of that, myself included, very guilty of trawling through forums and taking in things that, you know, some guy from wherever in the world has written on a forum, reading that and taking it as bloody gospel, you know. But it's you know, it's all gear, isn't it? It's just
absolutely, and we'll be keeping an eye out. You know, whatever you're going to be playing or adding to your board or whatever it's going to be, we'll know when you let us know.
Talent replacement centre.
Now, a lot of big buzz over Nuno's solo on Rise and the Extreme record, and of course Wolfgang's been making some huge impact as well. Feels very much like, you know, there's a real desire for, you know, these guitar moments, you know, because they used to be every week. There was something new coming out. You know, even when you were looking back in the sort of Britpop days, you know, there were still cool solos, you know, like that were happening. You know, it doesn't need to be, you know,
virtuosic.
You know what I mean? Like this is just, and there's so much more few and far between. Or they certainly appear that way.
Yeah, definitely.
I mean, what's your take on that? You know, the importance of the guitar solo in music right now.
I listened to an interview the other day with Nuno, actually, talking about obviously all of the attention that his solo on Rise got. And he kind of hit the nail on the head, you know. I think it's kind of, again, it's a bit of a perfect storm in terms of there is this desire for guitar moments, you know. I think guitar, you know, will never go away. Obviously, its kind of popularity in terms of its kind of placement in popular music, or, you know, contextually, or its kind of prominence of its role varies and waxes and wanes. I think it went through a phase probably 10 years ago where it really was relegated to kind of, you know, sort of just very subtle parts in the background, if at all, in pop music, you know, which went very kind of software instrument sort of orientated. In recent years, you've started to see it come back, you know, and not just in terms of big pop artists incorporating guitar into their tracks, but just guitar-driven music come into the fore again, you know. And I think, again, like I said, the sort of all the press and sort of attention that Rise has got is kind of testament to that. And you know, was the first to say that, you know. Obviously, an incredible guitar player, and it's a fantastic solo as well. But I think, again, it's just testament primarily to this just clamouring for guitar stuff, you know. So it's encouraging, you know. It's as a guitar player, as someone who principally plays guitar, you know, it's cool to see that there is this sort of desire for it again.
Would you ever feel like on a new record that you would really sort of set out, because I don't imagine
set out to create an iconic solo?
Well, you know, that's the thing. I mean, it is laughable in a sense, but you know, there has to be an element of like, this is a thing that I'm planning on doing. Like when you're trying to write a song, you want it to be as good as possible.
Oh,
why not with the solo? Like,
I mean, I think, again, you know, like that obviously kind of, to use the Nuno thing as a reference, obviously that was Total Guitar's whatever it was, like number one solo of the 21st century. You know, sort of the last 23 years, that was kind of kind of highlighted. And amazingly, at number 14 in that list was bloody Tell Me How It Feels off our album, you know. And like I had a phone call with the guys at Total Guitar, talked about that, and you know, kind of was interviewed on the process of that. And it's an interesting one, because that, of all solos, I mean, Cardinal Black was quite an unusual one, I guess, in a sense, in that we were a new band, and when I recorded that solo, again, Tom talked about it on stage a little bit last night, we were very conscious of not wanting to do that inevitable thing that new bands do, of kind of launching the Facebook page, launching the Instagram, kind of doing the big things coming soon kind of thing, and then it being 6 months of nothing, and then you play a gig in your local bar, whatever. We were very much conscious of, I guess it was a slight luxury that my YouTube stuff and kind of online presence or whatever afforded us, that we could just go bang, Friday afternoon, here we are, we're a new band, this is our first track, this merch available, this, you know, kind of like this a definitive release date for the EP, we've got this release schedule planned for the EP and the next single. But as a consequence, Tell Me How It Feels, which was a new song, had never been toured. We'd never played it live. We'd never kind of road tested it. And 99% of the solos that I play on records are just an amalgamation, or kind of like a bastardization of stuff that I've done live. You know, if we tour a track for 6 months, inevitably I've never played the bloody same solo twice. Even if I wanted to, I couldn't. But, you know, stuff starts to take shape slowly but surely. You'll start to do something, and maybe one night you play something like a little melodic phrase or idea, and kind of think, oh, that was cool, I'll do that again tomorrow. And then that becomes a bit of a kind of a linchpin for the solo. But with Tell Me How It Feels, there was none of that. So when it came to recording the solo for that track, it was just this blank canvas of like, right, however many bars, have a stab at it. And it was comparatively to most of the solos that I put down on records, it was a little bit painful. Consequently, I took a little bit of, not working out per se, you know, I've never worked anything out in my life, too bloody lazy, but it took a little bit of a kind of more of a thought process than usual, because there was just this vast blank space. And sod's law, the one time I do that, everyone falls over themselves and seems to love it. So I think the lesson there is don't overthink it. So it's you know, I don't set out to sort of, you know, again, it's songs are what endear, as much as kind of like great solos get a lot of attention, you know, for good reason in most cases. I think songs, you know, are very much at the heart of what we're trying to do. And if a solo, it's cliche, it's the ultimate cliche at this point, if the solo serves the song and the solo serves the advancement or the development of the track and moves it somewhere or takes it somewhere where it couldn't have necessarily gone with a middle eight or bridge or a double chorus or whatever, then more power to it. But if you're trying to just stick something in that you think, well, the guitar heads will go mad for this, I could care less, to be honest.
That makes a lot of sense. Before I let you go, Chris, Buck and Evans, are we going to see any more?
Yeah, quite possibly in the future. I honestly, you know, luckily since we launched Cardinal Black, it's just gone so mad. You know, we had no expectations. We launched in May of 2021 with a kind of expectation, I guess, of like, well, it kind of feels like COVID's coming to an end, and then as soon as we did that, it all kind of seemed to kick off a little bit again. So it was actually a good few months. We did our first show in August of 2021 at Cardiff Castle, and then picked up a tour very quickly with Miles Kennedy, touring around the UK, and it, genuinely, I think our fourth show ever was Shepherd's Bush Empire to like 2,000 people or whatever it was, and it was nerve-wracking to say the least. You know, I don't particularly struggle with nerves. I get nervous energy more than anything else. I just want to get on stage. You know,
use it in a positive
yeah,
way.
exactly. Yeah, it just makes me excited to get on stage. You know, I imagine I'm a bloody nightmare to be around for the half an hour preceding a gig, because I'm like, fuck, is it time yet? Can we go on now? So I imagine a bit of a nightmare in that respect, but I've never really struggled with nerves. But that was a bit of a kind of like, are we ready for this? This is our fourth gig or whatever, fourth, fifth, sixth, whatever it was. You know, we felt very wet behind the ears. But yeah, so we've been very lucky that it's, you know, that picking up that tour so quickly kind of set a bit of a precedent, and just in terms of how much it kind of feels like things were just snowballed. You know, like, you know, we did our first headline tour kind of late last year, just before the record came out. Thinking about that was genius, wasn't it? Tour before the record's ready, or before the record's out. First headline tour just late last year, and then our second headline tour this summer just gone. And we've been so lucky to be playing the packed venues, and you know, kind of then picking up the Peter Frampton tour.
It's hard just to fit in everything.
Yeah, it's so busy, you know, and you know, couple that with kind of all the stuff that I've got going on then, whether it's the YouTube stuff or just family stuff, being a family man. So just it's busy. It's difficult to fit everything into your life that you want to fit in. At some point, you just have to prioritize things, I guess, and go where the prevailing wind, pardon the phrase, on a ship, you got to go where the prevailing wind seems to be taking you. So at the minute, that seems to be on a boat. So.
Well, look, Chris, thanks so much for taking some time to talk today.
Man, thank you for having me, man.
We'll catch you next time.
It's good to catch up. It's been a while. Thanks for watching.